You had mentioned a little bit about your background, which crossed into particularly your doctoral thesis that crossed into this conversation around competencies. So now I'd like to ask a few questions about your views on certifications. And I know for our audience, it may have different meaning. Certifications for those in the association space versus certifications for someone who might work for an agency might mean something different, but with your background, certainly from that professional development perspective and in contracting, would let us know a little bit about your views on the need for and the challenges of accreditation for our professionals in our practice.
Well, I'm going to try to be deliberate and thoughtful on how I respond to certification, and that's largely because having studied this stuff, I could probably go on for more time than we have today to talk about the pros and cons, the nuances that I perceive are real in certification. So cutting to the chase. For me, as I think about professional development, as I think about developing the entire acquisition community, competencies are king. I care about the competencies. And if certification gets us there, great, it's a great tool. But for me, competencies are king. If I find that certifications don't work, I think we should be smart and flexible and say, okay, we tried that, that didn't work. But still understand what competencies matter and drive program or have programs that drive to those competencies, that drive the workforce to acquire those competencies. So for me, again, competencies are key. That being said, I sometimes like to needle our colleagues over at DOD because even though OFPP is in charge of federal procurement policy, DOD is a big player, and they have some significant and unique needs, and they will make their own calls, as they often do. And they did. They got out in front of me on certification, but they went in the right direction. And so my ego can go to the side. They went in the right direction, I think, on several fronts, and I'm looking to see or maintain the alignment of the civilian agencies to DOD. Now, that's something I always thought was desired but not required. I'd like to maintain alignment with DOD, but it's not necessary that we do it if I think they've gone in the wrong direction and the civilian chief acquisition officers would, if they would tend to agree, then we would go in a different direction. And it may be that it's not the wrong direction, as I said, but a direction that serves DOD's mission needs, but doesn't necessarily serve ours. If that were the case, we could do different things. But in this case, no, I think DOD got it right, and we need to be aligned to what DOD is doing with respect to certification. So more to follow on that. We still have more leadership discussions to hold, but I think what DOD's intentions are is something that's known to the community, and now it's time to have those conversations.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that because, as you know, through the DPC memo that drew the connection of competencies to certification into the DoD pathway of using the NCMA contract management standard. We are delighted to hear that because we as an organization are here to help advance the standards, and we are competency focused. We want that to be the driver. You're exactly right. This is a tool. This should get us there. Do you feel that those types of things can be continued to be developed as we go beyond the contract management standard that gets someone for a single level certification into something that might be those higher order competencies?
So yes, going back to the competency structure, or not competency structure, but the certification structure as it exists now, particularly the DWIA levels 1, 2, 3, with their civilian counterparts, FAC C 1, 2, 3. Those were born out of a desire to have us look a lot like the old skilled trades, where they had entered apprentice or apprentice, journeyman, and master, those three levels. But we probably should be better aligned to something akin to the accounting profession, where they have certified, what's CPA stand for? Certified Professional Accountant, I believe.
Public account.
Public accountant, thank you. I knew that. They could attest. They have the audit and test function. That's a public thing. So with the CPA, that model is probably more akin to where we need to be, particularly as business advisors, not people who are just pushing paper along, who are getting contracts out. Because software can get a lot of contracts out. Mm-hmm. We need professionals who add value by using professional judgment, talking about the right contract type, and any number of professional judgments that are properly within our purview. And I think a single certification model such as DAU, or rather DOD, is considering, I think that is a good direction to consider. And that's something I've sent signals that I'm excited about that I think that is a good direction.
Well, fantastic. We're excited about it, and we hope that as the civilian side explores and sees what the FACC could become, we know that our community, the NCMA community, is here. We're delighted to support any way we possibly can. So certification itself really is a lot about the future. So if someone's thinking about their progress and their career development, certifications, whether they be to be able to sit in the buyer chair on behalf of the federal government, whether it's DOD or IC or civilian, or other certifications such as our certifications or the CPA, for example, it's about their future. So as we look at the future of the workforce, I know that the OFPP has been working toward the workforce for 2025. What are some of the focus areas that this program will take on? And what are some of those key characteristics that you want to be seeing in that future, that is in the future workforce? So
with respect to Workforce 2025, one of the reasons that we named it Workforce 2025, specifically that year, was because at first we were thinking about something that had a longer span, something like Workforce 2030. But I pushed back and said, the factors that impact the way we do work are often driven by automation, and that changes so rapidly that we need to have shorter perspectives, shorter sprints that drive us to specific goals of preparing a workforce for a reality that unfolds in a 5-year runway instead of a reality that unfolds over 10, over 15 years. In other words, we don't have that much time. Some of the automation tools that have already come out and that are relatively mature are things like robotics process automation. And I like to refer to that as, or those as process automation tools instead of robotics. That sounds scary. But they are tools. And it is process automation, and that is the focus. Automating those processes that often drive how we do our work as procurement professionals. Automating those processes that are often routine. And then sometimes for some of us, we can find those processes rather mundane. But automating those allows us to get them done faster, supporting the frictionless acquisition goal of shortening that time, get it done faster, and yet you can ensure that the proper guardrails for compliance are baked into the procurement process when you use robotics process automation. So in Workforce 2025, I want to be able to have a nimble workforce that can quickly use process automation tools as they roll out. Quickly use those. Perhaps even some who are skilled enough to develop new process automation tools that might suit their particular need. Now, we at OFPP need to orchestrate that so that everybody's not solving the same problem, so that everybody's not putting out process automation tools that deal with just contract closeout, so that we're starting to be strategic about developing those tools. So that's part of what we need for Workforce 2025. But we also need to we need to, at the center of that, adjust the thinking of our acquisition professionals so they're not thinking of themselves as process champions who just know the process. Because as that's baked in, we need them to move from those lower level skills to those higher order skills, those higher knowledge skills, such as business advisory services. Mm-hmm. They need to understand that. And that's going to require us to change the way we do a lot of our training and train our focus even in education. But also, automation is going to roll out some tools that have not yet matured or are still maturing, are still developing. Things like natural language processing, machine learning. These tools can help us in a number of ways. For example, I think the big brass ring in acquisition is if we can crack the requirements development process problem. If we can crack that if we can crack that nut, that's a huge victory. And I think these higher order artificial intelligence tools, I think those can help us do that. There are tools that already exist that can help adjust the way we craft language. When I text, the app will finish my sentences for me. And if we have an app that can support requirements development that is tied to crawlers that can go through different sites and find good language that works, that app can inform the author of a particular statement of work or what have you. And that's the brave new world I think that we need that we need to prepare our workforce to be able to thrive in.
It's exciting to hear you applying agility principles to policy and bringing in, instead of going out to 2050 or whatever, something shorter,
yes,
because we
absolutely.
need to iterate faster. Well, and also delighted to hear you talk about how we can remove some of these mundane activities, because many of you who participated in GCMS and World Congress know about our Innovation Alley, which is intended to highlight these types of tools across the government agencies to talk about what is technology able to do, but more importantly, how it's able to allow that contracting officer to be more informed, be a more informed advisor to the business. And I think that is the higher order thinking you're talking about, is when we get the mundane out of the way, it doesn't mean we're going to remove jobs. It means we're going to be able to have people who know better about what the requirements are, know better about what the business is trying to accomplish to help serve the ultimate need of the American public.
You're absolutely right. We're not going to remove jobs with that way of thinking. We're going to change and enrich jobs with that way of thinking, so that people have some breathing space, and so that some of the work they can do is to bring others along, because we're aging in our workforce, and as we get younger people, they don't have time to educate them or train them or bring them along. But with these automation tools, we can dump some of the mundane stuff, allow the top professionals to focus on professional judgment and professional development.
Well, that's wonderful. So it's a great conversation to continue to have about Workforce 2025. I know those of you who participated in GCMS heard about it, and hopefully we'll be able to cover more of that in future NCMA contract management magazines.